With AI becoming more common in the public, whether for professional or casual reasons, it's worth pointing out that you can truly ask it just about anything and it will form some type of answer with reasoning behind it. So I took the logical steps and asked it about bad metal albums. I hopped on Google Bard wanting to ask a simple question. What are the top 10 worst metal albums of all time? Bardy gave me a nice little list, and then I asked the Bard to elaborate on each entry listed. Bardy was more than happy to do so, and I refer to him as Bardy now. According to Google, Bard draws on information from the web to provide fresh, high-quality responses. That means Bardy scans tons of blogs and websites and hate comments, and then compiles those into a listed statement. Yep, sounds like the perfect storm to me. Bardy said this list was based off a variety of reasons, including poor songwriting, uninspired production, and a lack of creativity. I'll show screenshots of the questions and answers later just to prove that I didn't cheat or to make any of this up. Let's see what Google Bard says are the top 10 worst metal albums of all time.
10. Assassins, Black Metal PT1 by Celtic Frost, 1990. This album was Celtic Frost's sixth studio album, and it was a departure from the band's traditional black metal sound. The album was criticized for its lack of focus and its inconsistent songwriting.
We could address the part about how Celtic Frost abandoned their black metal roots, or we can address how Celtic Frost did not make Assassin's Black Metal Part 1, but rather it was Noctimistium. If there's one thing that black metal elitists hate more than a black metal band selling out, it's not associating the right album with the correct band. Swing and a miss, Bardy.
Lay down your souls to the gods, rock and roll.
9. Metal Black by Venom, 2006. This album was Venom's first album in 10 years, and it was a return to the band's traditional black metal sound. The album was criticized for its lack of originality and its over-reliance on nostalgia.
Wild to hear that Bardy, the Google Bard, is such a metal elitist, but here we are with Bardy dumping all over Venom. Metal Black is a play on black metal, one of Venom's best-known albums. Outside of that, it's news to me that this is one of the worst metal albums ever made, especially as Venom are held in pretty high regard in metal royalty. This was also decades into Venom's career, and after many lineup changes, I thought that Metal Black was a better return to form than previous Venom albums before it, especially as the group helped popularize thrash and extreme styles in Europe. Or maybe it's because people thought it was going to be as good as black metal. Or because Google Bard thought it was an actual black metal album and Bardy is a black metal elitist, which is a bigger can of worms. The fact that I even said black metal out loud probably upset Bardy because I didn't respect it enough.
8. Octagon by Bathory, 1995. This album was Bathory's 12th studio album, and it was a departure from the band's traditional black metal sound. The album was criticized for its lack of originality and its over-reliance on industrial metal influences.
Bardy is a black metal elitist. This list took a dark turn, and I was not expecting Google Bard to be so deep into true cult material. Now, Bardy's going after Bathory. That's a death sentence. Or is it? I'm actually not sure if this is one of the albums that black metal fans disacknowledge or not, so I don't know whether Bardy is accurate. Bardy, you're confusing me. Octagon is not Bathory's 12th studio album, by the way, and I'm not sure how much it was criticized for lack of originality and reliance on industrial influence. I feel that if it was black metal relying on industrial metal influences, then it would have had to be somewhat original for the group. Can you see how wildly I'm swinging just to connect and with some type of logic on this one? I don't know. All I know is there are Bathory fans that will hate Google if they see this. Black metal fans have a lot of resentment for the most things anyway, so I guess that makes sense. 8th worst metal album, though.
7. Near-Death Experience by Cro-Mags, 1993. This album was Cro-Mags' first album in 5 years, and it was their first album to feature a new vocalist, John Joseph. The album was criticized for its lack of focus and its inconsistent songwriting.
Bardy got a lot of this wrong. This was not the first Cro-Mags album in 5 years, and was definitely not the first to feature John Joseph, as Joseph was the original singer. This was the last album to feature Joseph, however, and this album was definitely not well received as previous material, and some of the subject matter rubbed some fans the wrong way. Shame, because Cro-Mags were originators in a lot of ways, fusing hardcore punk and thrash and really standing for something in the 80s and even into the early 90s. I can at least see an argument as to why this is not liked as much compared to previous Cro-Mag albums, but even calling this one of the worst metal albums of all time feels like a stretch, considering it wasn't the worst thing ever, even if the lineup changed hard right after. Maybe Bardy scoured online notes from John Joseph over the years and got his thoughts from Google's reasoning.
6. Supercharger by Machine Head, 2001. This album was Machine Head's first album after the departure of guitarist/vocalist Rob Flynn, and it was their first album to feature a new vocalist, Phil Demmel. The album was criticized for its lack of originality and its over-reliance on nu metal influences.
There is a lot wrong with this right off the bat. First of all, it was not the first album after Rob Flynn's departure. Flynn was on this album. Phil Demmel was not on Supercharger. Supercharger was a doomed album for two reasons. One, the first single was released in September 2001, and the song was pulled from TV and radio because the song was called Crashing Around You, which made people a bit uncomfortable after the attacks. Awful timing and no promotion after. Second, this was Machine Head following some of the nu metal fashion of the time and giving up what made them a name for years in metal. Supercharger was not well received by the few fans who did go out to get it. In terms of quality, it's not great. In terms of release, it was a disaster. Google Bard easily picked this for a number of reasons, and going nu metal, I can't imagine is something that Bardy would love, even in 2001.
5. We've Come For You All by Anthrax, 2003. This album was Anthrax's first album in 5 years, and it was their first album to feature a new vocalist, Joey Belladonna. The album was criticized for its lack of focus and its inconsistent songwriting.
Apparently Bardy is not familiar with Anthrax's lineup changes, and the Joey Belladonna slander, I'm sure, is going to have some people upset. We've Come For You All was, however, the first Anthrax record to feature Rob Caggiano on lead guitar, and their final Anthrax album with John Bush on vocals. So there's a lot Google Bard missed, which is harsh considering Bardy ranks this as one of the worst ever. What's also interesting is that I was not aware that We've Come For You All was that despised by any metal fan or music fan ever. If anything, it was one of the more passable Anthrax albums, even if not held as high regard as other Anthrax albums. So I'm curious where angry, outdated message board Bardy looks up to get this feedback. Hard to imagine where that worst rating comes though. Maybe Bardy just doesn't like John Bush, or Rob Caggiano. Hope Bardy doesn't look up Volby, because Rob's there now and doing great.
4. Infestissumam by Ghost, 2013. This album was Ghost's second album, and it was their first album to be released after the band's identity as a satanic metal band was revealed. The album was criticized for its lack of originality and its over-reliance on theatrics.
There's already an argument here about the band's identity as satanic being revealed, as that was part of the gimmick from the beginning. Also, I stand by my saying that Ghost is about as satanic as a Spirit Halloween store. Not exactly deep into the fundamental tenets as much as having fun, catchy choruses. Infestissumam is arguably what started Ghost's explosion of popularity, and I do think the lack of originality is wildly untrue, as not many other bands were doing what Ghost was in 2013 by a long shot. The over-reliance on theatrics can be quite true though. However, that's part of the charm with Ghost. Also, it doesn't have much to do with the music or on the sophomore release. But if Bardy is going off social media posts and edgelords commenting on how Ghost is not metal enough, it's no wonder why Bardy thinks this is one of the worst albums ever. Bardy, though misguided, has a lot of feelings.
3. Diabolus in Musica by Slayer, 1998. This album was Slayer's first album to feature a new guitarist, Gary Holt. The album was criticized for its departure from Slayer's traditional thrash metal sound, with some critics accusing the band of selling out.
I've seen many Slayer lovers defend this album through desperate measures. Gary Holt did not play on this album, however, so Google Bard is already off to a rough start in listing info about Diabolus and Musica, or Slayer. Ever want to make a Slayer fan mad? Just get info about them wrong. This was a departure from Slayer's traditional thrash sound, though. Anyone who was around at the time or listens now can hear how much it was aimed for an evolving nu metal audience. Even Kerry King would eventually disacknowledge it and refer to it as Slayer's Turbo. Even if I don't like it and think it's one of Slayer's weakest, I would not go as far to say as this was the third worst metal album of all time. Google Bard held Slayer up to a high standard and must have been offended by Diabolus and Musica not being as to the measure, or he just doesn't like nu metal.
2. Virtual 11 by Iron Maiden, 1998. This album was released after the death of longtime guitarist Adrian Smith, and it was the first Iron Maiden album to feature a new guitarist, Janek Jers. The album was criticized for its lack of focus and its inconsistent songwriting.
So not only did Google Bard get a lot of this info wrong with Janek and Smith, but this was also Blaze Bayley era Iron Maiden. Boy, do people have thoughts on this era. Virtual 11 in '98 was and still is seen by many people as bland. When describing anything Iron Maiden ever, the word bland should not be associated, but it's here. Bardy saying this is the second worst metal album of all time, though, I think is a stretch, even if it's one of Iron Maiden's weakest. Iron Maiden's weakest is still significantly better than 99% of some metal bands' best effort. This was just a continuation of a questionable era from Steve Harris and company without Bruce Dickinson. Maybe Bardy just is a diehard Maiden fan, and so him having a strong reaction to anything in the Bailey era may send this bucket of bolts revolting. Google Bard feeds off of emotions written through the internet, and a lot of those emotions are from metalheads complaining about not getting enough Bruce.
1. Saint Anger by Metallica, 2003. This album was widely criticized for its use of a snare drum sound that was described as a garbage can being hit with a baseball bat. The album also featured a lack of guitar solos and a more simplistic songwriting style than Metallica's previous albums.
Even chatbots are making fun of Saint Anger. Google Bard said Saint Anger sounds like a garbage can being hit with a baseball bat. That is so absurd and fantastic and awful, I still can't get over it. Bardy also pulled out the reasoning for the lack of guitar solos and snare drum abuse, while also accusing Metallica of having a simpler writing style than albums like Load and Reload. There's a discussion there, that's all I'm saying. With so many people have complained about Saint Anger over the years, it makes sense that a bot would read through all that and decide this album as being the worst metal album ever. Look at what countless people have said about Saint Anger. What else is the bot gonna think? I'm also curious to hear the defense now by Metallica diehards screaming about Saint Anger being not that bad, when even Google's AI ranks it as the worst metal album ever. I mean, Metallica diehards go crazy defending the band already. This should make their heads explode. Here are the screenshots of me asking the questions on Google Bard just to make sure that everything I said was accurate. I did not make it up. Do I think any of these albums are the worst metal album ever? No, I really don't. Does that make Google Bard wrong? I mean, I guess now he's just a misinformed bot, but it's still an opinion. All we've learned is that Bardy, the Google Bard, is a black metal elitist and a thrash snob. Sounds right to me. And that was a look at what Google Bard thinks are the top 10 worst metal albums of all time. What do you think is the worst metal album ever? Should I do another Google Bard video? Leave a comment, let everyone know. Big thanks to my patrons and special thanks to Chris Doman and Dom Noble. You can have a say in upcoming videos, get weekly new music playlists, and see videos early by supporting Rocks on Patreon and through a YouTube membership. Click the join button below or the link in the video description to help the channel. Please subscribe and ring the bell to get notified of upcoming videos, and you can keep up to date with Rocks on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I also like to imagine Bardy, the Google Bard, at a metal show with his battle vest on, arms crossed, staring at the stage in snobbish disappointment because he doesn't like the band performing. Bardy is an amalgam of online metal nerds.